A Grain of Wheat, chapters 3 and 4. Chapter 3. My mother didn't worry about me as long as Carlo and I were together. She didn't know about the dangerous game we played. We chased horses at the pasture. I waved a stick, and Carlo barked at their heels. One day I ran too close behind them. One of them kicked me. Corinne found me in the pasture. I was covered with blood, and the mark of a horse's hoof was on my forehead. For weeks I lay in bed. Later, my mother told me it was a terrible time for us all. We didn't think you would live. Even the doctor didn't think so. You didn't know any of us. You talked without knowing what you were saying. Once you said, "Too much purple." But I began to get well. I sat up in bed. My mother cut out maps and made me a geography book. I kept it for a long time. I had forgotten how to walk. I had forgotten how to dress myself and tie my shoes. I had to learn those things all over again. The doctor took my bandage off and said, "There, he's good as new." And I was, except for the scar on my forehead. I still have the scar. That year, my family gave me a special Christmas. I had a Christmas tree. I don't remember how it was decorated, probably with tinsel and crepe paper and strings of popcorn. I do remember that it was beautiful. Just having the tree would have been enough. But on Christmas morning, there were presents. There was a drum. There was a box of candles, red and white and green. There was a little wooden wagon filled with blocks. There were 3 books, Mother Goose, Peter Rabbit, and an ABC book. There was candy, too. And there were popcorn balls and an orange. Corinne told me Santa Claus had been there in the night. Just after Christmas, there was a snowstorm. The pastures and fields were white, and I was safe and warm inside. I was there with my family. I had my presents. I had my tree. My mother wanted to take the tree down. I begged for it to be left up. One more day, I would say. Just one more day. New Year's came and went. My tree was still up. I had seen a picture of a Christmas tree with candles on it. One day, I lighted a candle, tried to set it on my tree. There was a whoosh, like an explosion. The tree burst into flames. My father picked it up and threw it out into the snow. I ran into the kitchen. Under the sink was a kind of closet with a small door in it. It was where we kept things we weren't quite ready to throw away, mostly old shoes. I crawled under the sink and shut the door. I lay there in the dark on top of the shoes and I cried. It seems I cried all day. It wasn't just that my tree was gone. The whole house might have been burned. No one told me to come out from under the sink. No one scolded me when I did come out. My family must have thought I had been punished enough. For weeks afterwards, there was a burned spot on the ceiling to remind me of the terrible thing I had done. The interesting thing about chapter 3 I always think about is Christmas and how excited he was to actually have a tree. That tells us that they didn't have a tree every year. That's something that today we're used to. We have Christmas trees and presents also. It sounds like he didn't usually get presents at Christmas. And now we have so many presents that we get at Christmas. It seems it's so much compared to what he had. I also find it interesting that he talked about getting an orange for Christmas. He put that on the list. He remembers having an orange. It must have been a special treat to get an orange. But where we live here in California, we have fruit all the time and oranges and orange trees all around us. But we can go to the grocery store and we can buy any fruit that we want pretty much any time of the year. And so for him to feel that that orange was special is a real reminder of the time that they lived in. They didn't have access to all the things that we do today. Chapter 4. The 3 Christmas books were read to me until I knew them by heart. From the ABC book, I learned the letters A is an apple. Oh, A is an apple pie. B, bit it. C, cut it. And all the rest. From Mother Goose, I learned about verses and rhymes. And Peter Rabbit was a good story with pictures. I held the books in front of me and pretended to read. I made pencil marks in a tablet and pretended I was writing. My mother taught me to write Clyde. Now, when you go to school, you'll know how to write your name, she said. I wanted to read and write, but I didn't want to go to school. Someone had told me tales of what went on at school. They must have frightened me. Those were the days of our country schools. Ours was the Bray School. My sister Louise had taught there before she was married. My sister Corinne had just finished high school and was ready to take Louise's place. Corinne was teaching for the first time. I was going to school for the first time. It was a 2-mile walk to school. We started off together. Almost always it rained on the first day of school, but this was a sunny September day. I had my new dinner bucket. There was a beef sandwich in it, and a boiled egg, and a banana, and a piece of cake. But that gave me no joy. I said, I know I'll get a whipping. I'll be the teacher, Corinne said. I'm not going to whip you. They used to get spankings in class. They'd have a paddle, and they would get one on the behind if they got in trouble. We don't do that anymore. Later, we learned to cut across pastures and through woods to make the way shorter. On this day, we took the road, past Otis King's, past John King's and Mag Elliott's, over the iron bridge and up the clay hill, past George Haynes's, and there was School Lane. On one side of the lane was a pasture. On the other side was a row of hedge trees. An odd kind of fruit grew on them. Hedge balls, we called them. They looked like big green oranges and were good for nothing except to throw at fence posts or roll down hills. At the end of the lane was the schoolyard, with the schoolhouse in the middle. The schoolhouse was white with a red brick chimney. It had only one room. The blackboard was up front, along with the teacher's desk and the library. The library was a tall green cupboard with a door. There were rows of seats and desks for the boys and girls. In the back of the room was a big iron stove. Corinne and I were the first ones there. She wrote "Welcome" on the blackboard. Boys and girls began to come from the farms in the neighborhood. There were 9 boys and 9 girls. 2 or 3 rode horses to school, but most of them walked. I was in the first grade with 3 other boys, Leonard, Lawrence, and Harold. Later, Lawrence and Harold moved away, but Leonard and I were in school together for years. When we were called up for our first class, we sat on a long bench in front of the teacher's desk. The teacher asked a question. What would we buy if we had $100? I've forgotten what Lawrence and Harold answered. Leonard said he would buy a horse. That was a good answer for a farm boy. I said I would buy a table. The older boys and girls had been listening. They all laughed at my answer. Corinne said, "Why would you buy a table?" I said I didn't know. On the playground, girls and boys said, "A table, a table. What are you going to do with your table?" Ooh. And I knew I must guard against saying stupid things. Still, I liked school. I was surprised at how much I liked it, although I was sometimes sorry my dog couldn't be with me. Every day he started off with me. Every day I had to send him back. Must have been fun. Think about your school. There's only 18 kids in the whole entire school, and everybody was in one room, like we have one classroom, but they would be all ages. They could be anywhere from kindergarten all the way up to high school, and they would be all together. And it was one teacher's job to teach everybody. They didn't have as many different subjects as we have today. It was a little bit simpler time. But there was a chimney, which means they had a fireplace in there. That's how they stayed warm in the winter. And 2 miles to walk or ride a horse. No bicycles. Instead of riding their bike or their scooter, they rode their horse to school. I think that'd kind of be cool.